Welcome to the 52nd Anderson Sports Performance Lecture. Thank you everyone for taking your time today to be here. We are honored to have Elaine Vassie with us. Elaine is the General Manager of the Dallas Jackals Rugby Club. She started her coaching career for Manchester Village Spartans in 2007. She continued to the English Rugby Union in a community and development role, and in 2009 was named the head coach of English National League club Manchester FC, a role considered arguably the hardest job in rugby by the press. She was the first female to ever hold a head coach or director of rugby position at the National League level. She traveled to Italy to work on a consultancy basis with Italian club side DAK Matopa.
Very good.
Yep. Moved into the U.S., appointed director of rugby and head coach of the Dallas Griffins, selected as a member of the Texas Select Side coaching staff for the 2014-2015 season, returned to the UK in 2015 and was part of the management team for the Scotland women in their Six Nations campaign. She was named assistant coach of the Scotland women's sevens in the European Women's Trophy Series, and completed a postgraduate certificate in elite performance, returned to the US to take on the director of rugby and men's head coach role at the Dallas Rugby Football Club. She resides here in North Texas with her husband Danny, two children, Arden and Iceland. Completely messed that up, my apologies. And their two dogs, Doko and Nala. 3 for 4, not bad. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Elaine Vassie.
Thank you. First up, thanks for having me here. My comfort zone isn't a lecture theatre, which you will probably see as we go through this, so bear with me. I'm far happier with an informal conversational. So yes, I've got a little bit of a presentation, some background that will tell you a little bit about rugby, our project in Dallas, and I guess what's brought me here. But hopefully we have a lot of time at the end in terms of questions and very open on what those might be from all of you. I'd like to start with a question to give me some context. Just raise a hand if you've ever watched a rugby game before. Ooh, this is good. I've definitely been in rooms where there's been one sole hand feeling lonely. Raise a hand if before today you've heard of Dallas Jackals. Good. Okay, this is awesome. So what I'd like to start with is just a little slide in terms of what rugby was, how it came to be. So rugby essentially was brought about by a guy who was frustrated playing a different game, decided he was going to pick up a ball and run away with it. And through that, rugby was born. And I think the funny bit in that for me is actually definitely feel frustrated at various points. Frustration can lead to great things, okay, as long as we kind of apply ourselves to it and work through it. The US actually had a really proud history in terms of rugby. So whilst it's not one of our major sports now, when we look back at the Olympics, 1920, 1924, that was the USA that won those, okay? Other sports, football obviously came into being. Rugby kind of dwindled off a little bit. And here we're back today with Major League Rugby trying to raise the profile of the game, hopefully give more people access to the game, and actually have all the experiences, or even just some of the experiences I feel I've had through rugby. That's an awesome opportunity for anyone to be involved with. So on to two, thank you. Favourite things we've been told, and I'm really curious again when we get to questions in terms of your feedback on this, about rugby. We've done kind of focus groups here. It's been about some of the traditions. So the fact that the two teams actually off-field have dinner together post-match. There's a really kind of healthy family feeling if someone's a rugby player. The joke is probably you could travel anywhere in the world and you already have a friend and a place to stay. Because actually that's part of what rugby gives us. The pre-game haka, which some of you might have seen if you've watched. So some of the traditions, the All Blacks, New Zealand's national team. They do a war dance, essentially, prior to the game. Really unique. A lot of history tied into that. The Black Ferns, the female team for New Zealand, do a different war dance, because again, it's tied into their history as part of them as a nation. The other part, which is probably my favourite part, on this list at least, is certainly that the referee is sir. His decision is, or her decision, mom. Decision is a decision. There's no arguing, there's no moaning, there's no discussion. If there is, then you're off the field, which actually just allows us to play the game, as opposed to get distracted by people trying to buy penalties or conversations about things. It's very much referees respected. They're going to make mistakes, that's life. If they're not making mistakes, they're probably not making decisions. So that's kind of accepted as part of that process. So that gives you a little bit of insight into rugby. Major League Rugby. In the US, so initially we started, when all the screen was kind of shunted down here, with only 7 teams back in 2018. So actually in a relatively short period of time, we've gone from 7 to almost double that. We sit in 9 of the major 3 designated market areas within the US. So the strategy has really been go into major market areas, so Dallas, New York, Austin, Houston, Seattle. Look at building. Normally when a new league comes, they start with smaller areas where there aren't other teams, if you like, the football team, the baseball team being the obvious one in terms of the major leagues. The strategy for Major League Rugby has been different in terms of actually let's go into those marketplaces. There's obviously a healthy interest in sport. Let's show a different sport. Let's engage a different fan group with an experience. For us at Dallas Jackals, it's very much about we want to play an entertaining brand of rugby. And for me, coming here as a foreigner, and though I'd class here as home, obviously I speak with a slightly strange accent, it's about actually sharing the best bits of rugby, which is some of the values of the game. The entertainment factor of the game, that's 80 minutes on the field and it's action. There's not as many stoppages, but then taking from what I'd class as an American sports model and adding in the entertainment factor, adding the things that actually, when we first had meetings back in our office and people said to me, what's the entertainment with rugby? And I sat there with a very blank face saying, well, the game. And they said, well, no, but the entertainment. And I was like, but the game? And eventually kind of went on Google, because that's the live source for most things nowadays, and checked there wasn't something I was missing, having been so focused on the game, in terms of what does a halftime show look like, what does the pre-game look like, all the things that are done exceptionally well here. Actually, that's not really done all that well in rugby. And I feel if we can combine both of those, what we have is a really exciting, family-friendly product for people to come and watch. But what we also want to do is impact on the pathway for young Americans, access to a different sport, a sport that you can play at college, it's a contact sport, you can play at adult on an amateur level if you wish, it's still a contact sport. There's not really gaps in the market, well, there's not really a filler in the marketplace as we see it for that. So our project is about expanding those pathways, giving people opportunities and helping to support that growth, as well as actually putting a different sporting entertainment venture out there. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of background just in terms of Major League Rugby as the organisation, Dallas Jackals is us. On to the next one. The name Jackal, I'm curious if any of you that kind of raise your hand to watching some rugby would get the kind of double meaning on Jackal. I'm not going to make you say it, you can just give me a little wave if you do. Cool. So, Jackal, obviously an animal, multi-continent animal, pack animal, very loyal, can be seen as a bit of a scavenger, which I think we try and frame as, look, it just wants to take opportunities when they're there, as opposed to the negative side of that. It's also a player who in a tackle situation, so they make the tackle, person goes to ground, they then have an opportunity to steal the ball and turn that over. So the name Jackal as an animal kind of has a bit of a link to starting to share some of the rules, the laws as we call them, of the game with our audience. This is our squad that went to LA last weekend. When we speak about domestic talent development, really it's about people first. We'll have one of the youngest age profiles of squads within the league. Our strategy is very much about how do we build, how do we invest in people, give them the time, support and resources to actually grow within the league. So average age, I think for every game we've played this season has been 25 and under. The average age for these guys is 23. So we're looking at that pathway as we come out of college and transition into elite rugby. There's still a couple of 30-year-olds, 32-year-old in that squad picture. They probably won't appreciate me saying that, but it gives you a little bit more insight into what age profile we're looking at people coming through to us at. This is my screensaver on my laptop, and this is my family. The reason I share that, I think, again, going back to me probably not being comfortable with the idea of this kind of lecture, when I'd sat in these a few years ago, which thanks to the nice intro, you can probably do the maths, it was more than a few, people spoke about their job, they spoke about the achievements in their work, they spoke about all the good things, some superficial, some deeper, that you got to see. What I never felt someone spoke about is actually saying there is a balance to this, and I'm going to say the 80s now. The 80s, 90s, there was a really big message, and I'll say this is probably women, you can have it all, you can do the job, you can do this, you know. For me, there was never really an honesty to that. Actually, there's a balance, and whether you're male or female, there's a balance, particularly if they work in professional sports. So I keep this in my screensaver because when my players come into a meeting, I want them to see there's more to me than a job, and there should be more to them than being a rugby player. We certainly see that when we recruit them, because it's about having the right people in our pathway that we want to work with. It's about the right people on the project as a whole, and a person is more than their job title at any stage, and that's a really healthy thing to try and remember. It's not always easy to remember that, because I think in professional sport you can get very tunneled into what you literally have to do at that time, as opposed to remembering this. So this is the, let's say it's Instagram life version, okay? The next photo will be Instagram live version of me at work. So we've got me on the field, some of our players, draft day with our draft team. Kelsey's actually at the front here, she can give a little wave because I know she'll be embarrassed by that, but she absolutely deserves recognition because she's exceptional at what she does. So this is draft day in our office. We do draft, it's pre-recorded and then publicised, and then up on the top's game day. So this is probably the Instagram work version. The next slide, which I did not know we were going to record, oh no, I've jumped one, it's fine. Let's do this and we'll save the embarrassing slide for one more moment. This is, so draft day is huge for us when it comes to the developing domestic talent. Drafting is such a normal American collegiate to draft to professional sport pathway that actually for us in rugby to normalise that is something that fits within the rugby market. I think it's really key to actually normalising rugby as a professional sport, and that there is a pathway from the college game through to pros. So drafting, this is a little photo of. I wanted to share with you a clip that's actually one of the highlights reels from the broadcasts of the guy Eric, who's 22 now. He was our first pick, we had first pick in the draft, he was our first pick. It will show you a little bit of rugby, and it will show you the commentary that goes with that. For us, the thing I'll preface that by saying, Eric for us as a person, his answers to when we looked at we do FaceTime conversations, we watch all the film, but we want to have conversations with people. One of the questions we asked him was, in your position, we're going to sign an experienced international in that position. How do you feel about that? And he said, that's absolutely what I want and what I need. I want to learn, I want to develop, I know I'm not the finished product. That would be great for me. And for us, knowing he's absolutely a competitor, he was someone that we felt absolutely will step onto the field and play games in year one, which is a huge outcome for a draft prospect, and he has gone and done that. For him also to have that feedback and say, I want to keep learning and growing, the balance between the competitor and the humility to say, I still need to grow, that's the unique blend. If we want to bring the right people in, that's part of what we're talking about. So it's a little clip of our #1 draft pick, Eric.
Dallas, when you're ready.
Eric Naposki, UCLA.
Michael Dallas.
Before Ricky Davis, Queen's University. Aaron Gray, Kutztown University. Alejandro Torres, Thomas More University. Calvin Gentry, University of Memphis.
So that's rugby, for those of you that haven't seen it before. And for me, that's actually a real privilege as part of this job, is actually getting to share some rugby with people that haven't seen it before. The funny thing watching that clip, and the other photos have just arrived behind my head, is actually we were still on the touchline with a guest coach in, Really great guy. And the moment Eric caught that ball, his response was kick it, my response was have a go. Because we've seen what he could do in the film before we recruited him. We just want him to have confidence. And if we're tied into developing it, it's about people actually being in a supportive environment where they know they're going to be supported to have a crack at opportunities like that. And that's what's going to help us develop domestic talent. That's what's going to help us play entertaining rugby so that people watch it and fall in love with the game. The next slide, which I had created prior to knowing we would be recorded today, so I'll have to explain to my poor husband and our wonderful babysitter. This is behind the scenes of the first set of photos. So the first 2 photos are 2 texts to me when I'm away on a game weekend, saying to my husband, how's everything at home? This is Isla, our youngest, will be 1 next month, and Arden, our oldest, will be 3 in July. This is what it actually looks like. This on the end, this lady Claire could not have survived season 1 prep without her. She was awesome. She's been such a huge influence on myself, my husband, my son, Arden, my daughter, our lives, our dogs as well, because it was her that was present when we were doing the draft prep. And I think when we talk about the right people, it's not just, it's your whole environment, I think, is the thing I've probably learned over time. It's the people that are your friends, that you socialise with, that give you the downtime outside of professional sport, that keep you grounded on that when, and I don't look at socials, Kelsey does that, I stay well clear, but the bit on that where actually there's things that are, here's what you're not doing well, here's what we think you should do, here's, this player looks awful, why did you sign him? I don't want to hear that noise because it's noise, but occasionally you'll need people to say, hey, you're doing okay, like keep at it. It's really important to have the right people there to help do that for you, and they've got to be the same people that go, actually you need to rethink that. Having people that are comfortable questioning you is one of the healthiest things. You've got to have both of those factors. So this is normal life, and this is normal life on the work side. Kelsey, I'm sorry, because you will see yourself featured here. This is draft night when it actually went out on broadcast. This is Kelsey doing our socials whilst entertaining my child, so I have the absolute luxury and privilege of calling the players that we got to draft and say, hey, we want to welcome you to Dallas Chapels. This is draft prep a couple of months before with my newborn. And my husband took this photo. He said at some stage you need to see this because it is about him. So when I said to him yesterday, he said, what's the title of the talk? And I said, Balancing Rugby Life and Rugby. He said, oh, I could do that one for you, it'll be short. You don't. Which thankfully he said with a laugh and some humour, but in season and pre-season there's definitely a really serious edge to that. Compromises do get made frequently, and I think it's really healthy to actually say that and for people to hear it. For me on a personal level, before you even get to the family, that's probably how often I train. I would have trained twice a day. I don't. I'm probably unlucky if I train twice a week. It's probably actually some of the sleep side of things. It's the listening to podcasts or having conversations in your car. And then it's the things that's actually really important. It's the family and the friends that you have and the people that are there for you, and you don't actually feel that you get to spend the amount of time that you want to with them. And I think that's the challenge, that for me, those people understand part of me before meeting them has actually always been really driven in work. It's always been whatever I'm applying myself to, I probably get quite passionate about that, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't do it. And they understand that's part of me, and they understand that I try and make that balance, and we try and balance it at other times of the year where we do have more flexibility. But without them and without that knowledge, I couldn't do my job. And it's important, I think, to remember that. So selfishly, I'm sharing that because I need to say it often and frequently, because they absolutely do support me for that, and that's people in work and people outside of work. But also, I think when I think back to conversations I've had, I didn't hear sitting on your side of the table anyone talk about that, and if there were lessons that I wish I'd known earlier and sooner and heard more often, that would be one for me. Hopefully, you're all more emotionally advanced than I probably am or was. But actually it's something I think is really healthy to put out there as a conversation topic. We'll get the embarrassing ones off the slide there. The other question we asked, you gave a really nice intro that did make it sound quite old, on all the rugby jobs. I think things people tend then not to maybe discuss as much as all the other jobs I did before rugby. Because at times it can feel, when you want to work in sport, particularly professional sport, there's this frustrating period where you're trying to break in a door, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that, and ultimately you still have bills to pay, a house to live in, and you need to take a job. That's a list of some of the jobs I'll have done at various stages, from 13 with the paper round on until the jobs that would be listed on my resume now. There's not one of those up there that there isn't actually, on reflection and the good old value of hindsight, something that applies to what I do now, or some scenario that one of those put me in that actually helped shape some of the things I want to do now. The bottom list is a list of different industries before we get to professional sport. And I share that again because at times I would have been impatient and frustrated, but actually coming away from it and looking back, there's been some experiences there that have a more translatable value than some of the rugby jobs I've had to the job I do right now. So there's just a little, I guess, nod on my part to those jobs that actually, again, recognition of them, the situations that put me in, are actually really healthy for what I'm able to do now. And then with all that, here's probably the key things that I try and keep myself coming back to, and these have changed over the years. This isn't a list that's static. The last time I spoke about these was probably 6 months ago for a college back in the UK. I reviewed them again before I put them up here today as am I still happy with these? Is there anything that's different? And there wasn't. If I'd looked them up 2 years ago, there would be some subtle changes in that. The people first bit for me is huge, because I think that's what everything comes from. It's a group of people coming together going on a journey. Whether that's in your capacity as an AT, as a coach, as a HR person, admin, whatever, understanding those people and those people feeling valued is huge. And I think we have to appreciate sometimes what people feel they need, even if that's not what we might have the evidence that they do need. Because then we're actually working with the person first, not just the theory or the proven practice. We're actually saying, I want to understand you. I want to understand all of you, and that's your life outside and those horrific pictures that I have shared with you. Because then it's more genuine, and then we can actually build a true relationship to work together on whatever journey we're going to do. So the flip side to that on the person, they want to feel that they're able to contribute. Everyone wants to contribute to something bigger than themselves. And I think when I spoke about the frustrations earlier, a lot of the times for me, that's because I didn't feel the ability to contribute. I didn't feel like I could impact positively on something. And I think at the depth of everyone, there's some desire to do that. How we show it might present differently every time. Some of that might look negative, some of it might look positive. But I fundamentally believe everyone wants to contribute to everyone and to something bigger. So when we look at people being first, we have to have that at the core of what we do. Values against behaviours. The best example I can give you for this is one of the previous jobs that I listed, and company values before I went into work for them. We're people focused, we're future thinking, we want to be development driven. I thought, great, this sounds like an exciting company to work for. And I sat down on day one with the induction manual, yay thick, which they handed to me, which didn't feel very people-y. And then going through, and it was about our processes and procedures. Okay, cool. Would rather they were living, but I'll read the manual. And it said, if you have a good idea, and I was like, ooh, this sounds exciting. You need to wait 18 months before you feed that back through to us. And I paused and went, I've got to have read that one. Read it again, no. Must have read it 3 times and thought, well, what's going on? It's probably that company jumping in. They've somehow gotten the, still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow got on the trail of thought that was going to deliver this. Your values that you say you are, and then the behaviours that you're putting on people are so disconnected, but they must be disconnected on a day-to-day basis because no one else has been comfortable saying, hang on a minute, here's what we say we are, and here's what we're actually doing. And if we accept that's what we're actually doing, then actually we promote that is what's normal to be done. So that job, that experience of reading that manual is so burnt into my mind, I guess, because what I thought I'd bought into and who I thought I could be to help contribute to something bigger. Day one of walking through the door, nope, shut up and put up for 18 months. There's no way I was going to last 18 months in that job. Be okay saying I don't know, because I don't know is actually a great conversation starter, and I don't know means that you come into the conversation, we share ideas. I think initially I probably grew up thinking you needed to look like you knew. And actually that's a real fallacy. Probably the people I would worry about most are the people that tell me they know and they definitely know. Unless it's a value that they hold dear, I can accept that and I would promote that. But if it's they know something definitively, maybe there might be a little something we're kind of just missing if we don't have a conversation about it. And then positively plan for the worst, which is why this guy had 2 mics today. For me, that's sometimes we plan for the worst and that's a really negative experience. What happens if? And it's kind of this trail of all going wrong. If we can normalize that, then we can do it positively. We can have some fun with planning for the worst. What might happen if this happens? I don't know, what do you think? Let's have a conversation about it. And whether that's on field in terms of scenarios we might find when we're playing, or whether that's off field in terms of operationally what we do, planning for it in an environment where the stress of that isn't there and actually it's something we can engage with and apply ourselves to means that when we're in that, probably we're better prepped for it. And that makes the experience of something that's probably challenging, because it's the worst that we've anticipated, easier to get through together. So they'd be my little things. If you have the unfortunate event of seeing me in a few years' time, check me and see if they're still the same, if there's something that's evolved from that as well. And then this, hopefully, is the bit you all came for, and the exciting bit on my end is whatever questions you might have for me, and I hope from the presentation you get the idea that I am very open on the breadth of questions that you might ask. You've certainly seen me at some fairly low points on some of those photos, so feel free to fire away with any questions that you might have. And if you don't want to raise your hand, feel free to write something down and shove it to the front. Easy.
What are some of the rules for like contact in the rugby sport?
Good question. And it's a great question for here. Football I'd describe as collision, because actually there's minimal rules around the contact. There's obviously a face mask, and essentially people can be hit from any direction. In rugby, you can only tackle the person with the ball. Tackle as a law has criteria as to what's considered a legal tackle. So the height of the tackle, the fact you need to wrap, and you have an ownership to bring the person to ground are all some of the laws. You could hit someone, you could wrap. If they go beyond this, then that becomes an illegal tackle too. So we couldn't lift someone up and drive them to the ground. So it essentially makes it a more controlled contact, is why I'd call it a contact sport rather than collision. And maybe some of those are probably the basic ones to start off with.